All right. Welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining the ERF 2R Grantee Orientation. Um, just a couple of notes before we get started. Um, you should have been put on mute when you entered the meeting. We would request that you all please stay on mute. When you're not speaking, feel free to raise your hand and we'll either bring you off mute or you can come off mute if you have a question. Questions are very highly encouraged. We'll have multiple opportunities for you to ask questions during the orientation. We also have the chat box, which is for you to use as well, for any questions, any comments, anything you want us to know. We do also have closed captioning available if you hit in the the bottom right part of your screen. Just a brief agenda for us today. We're going to start just by introducing you all or asking you all to introduce yourselves in the chat box. We are going to introduce ourselves from Cal ICH and from Homebase. Cal ICH is going to give us an introduction to the ERF grant, some of the sort of requirements and deadlines associated with it. I'm going to give you all an introduction to technical assistance opportunities that we have available for you. You'll be able to ask us some questions and then we'll wrap up. So here, we would love to hear in the chat box. Just tell us who you are, give us your ERF to our community, as well as one thing that makes you excited about this grant. And we have all of your community names here up here on the screen. Also in yellow, we are thrilled to announce that there are a number of communities that are receiving another round of grant funding through the ERF grant, and those are the folks who are in yellow on the screen here. So welcome back, everyone. Excited to have you back in the mix. So yeah, we've got chat intros coming through. Thanks so much, everyone. And we'll allow those to come through and keep moving. We want to move into just a couple introductions from the Cal ICH team. This is kind of whom we are going to be introduced to in a second. This is not all of the Cal ICH staff. We're just going to sort of focus on the staff who are sort of most, who you would have the most opportunity to be connected with, or who would be most likely to be connected with in Cal ICH through your participation in this grant. So yeah, and also no need to panic. You don't need to remember everybody on the team and their role. If you ever have any questions for Cal ICH, you can email this address at the bottom, CalICHgrants at bcsh.ca.gov. So I'm going to hand it over to Amber to sort of move us through these introductions.
Thanks, Garen. So very excited to have you all here with us today. Like Garen said, just giving you a high overview of the ERF program and letting you know the supports that we have in place for you to assist you with expending the grant funds. So my name is Amber Ostrander, and I am the Chief for the Grants Operations Support Section. Our role is to support our grantees in expending funding according to
I also wanted to update you on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think somebody needs to be muted. Okay, I'll carry on. So our role is to support our grantees in expending funding according to the statutory requirements of the program and to provide grantees with the support and expertise needed so they can utilize the funding in the most effective ways within their community. We do this through through the efforts of 3 units, I should say. That is the monitoring unit, the data unit, and the technical assistance unit. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Ellen Michael, who will explain what the monitoring unit does and how they support you all.
Thanks, Amber. As Amber mentioned, my name is Ellen Michael. I am the Grants Monitoring Supervisor over our Grants Monitoring Unit at Cal ICH. Our unit supports grantees in meeting statutory deadlines, and we do this in a couple of different ways. One of the main things that our team oversees is the reporting process. So there are quarterly reports, which we'll be discussing later in this presentation, and my team helps to distribute and receive those. Additionally, my team is working on a desk review process, which is an active monitoring process that involves little involvement from the grantee, and takes the information that we have received through applications, reporting, and other communications with grantees, and combines that into one overall report to help us assess and understand how funds are being spent, but also provide that additional support should it be needed, partnering with Eric and Crystal to utilize the services available within each of their domes as well. So looking forward to working with all of you. Welcome back to those of you who we've worked with before. I think what we're going to do from here is I'll pass it off to Eric to explain a little bit more about his role on the team as well.
Good morning, everyone. Excited to be here working with you all. And congrats on being awardees. I am the grant status specialist. I started at Cal ICH, I think 3 or 4 months ago now, so I'm still kind of new, but getting quickly learned about what we do in terms of reporting requirements and all that. And that's mostly my focus, is working with the data that we collect from you all, fiscal data, person served data, narrative data, compiling it, analyzing it for usage in internal reports and external reports, and connecting with our HDIS team for other needs. And yeah, so that's mostly my role here at Cal ICH.
Thank you, Eric. I'll go ahead and hop in. All right, so welcome to all the ERF2R grantees. We're excited to have you here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what our technical assistance unit does. And my name is Crystal Brooks. The TA unit offers support to the grantees through ensuring they have access to experts in the homelessness field that can assist them in addressing unique community needs and ensure that grant funding is expended effectively. This support is provided through contracted technical assistance providers that have proven track records in the homelessness field. And the TA unit works very closely with the TA providers to ensure they are meeting the needs of all of our grantees. That provides a high-level overview of the support we intend to provide you. I will now explain how the TA is available to assist you. For the encampment resolution grants, Cal ICH has partnered with Homebase, who you will be introduced to shortly, to provide you with project delivery support. We do have a two-pronged approach to this, how we plan to support the TA, and that first starts with the implementation. We worked with Homebase to design a thoughtful and robust implementation plan, and that includes the technical assistance assessment. And the initial assessment's purpose is to get a better understanding of your unique community and project needs. And by this point, you should have received an email from Homebase about the upcoming technical assistance group assessments. You may have also attended the all grantee convening that was earlier this month, or a recent community learning group session. The areas discussed in the TA group assessments will be used to provide a baseline to continue that TA over the duration of the grant. The second approach is through evaluation. Cal ICH is working on this as a separate effort, and we will complete this evaluation to review the successes of the ERF program. We are hoping to identify scalable and replicable solutions for the ERF programs, and the details regarding this stage will be shared at a later time. I will now pass it back to Garen, who will introduce you to the Homebase team, the TA providers we have partnered with to assist all Cal ICH ERF grantees. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Crystal. This on the screen, what you see on the screen here, actually, why don't I introduce myself really quick? I think I haven't done that yet. My name is Garen Nigon. I'm a senior policy analyst with Homebase. I am one of 9 Homebase staff that are on the ERF technical assistance team. And then we have a number of additional staff supporting our team from another TA firm, TAC, the Technical Assistance Collaborative. So we have a really deep bench and a lot of technical expertise on a lot of topics related to encampment response. There are folks on this slide and folks from TAC with experience with things like creating and implementing effective by name lists in communities across the country, decreasing barriers to housing access for populations with a criminal history, building work plans for encampment response projects, collecting feedback from encampment residents to drive policy change, developing landlord engagement strategies, including unit acquisition and master leasing, much more than that. Later in today's agenda, we're going to kind of discuss how to plug into some of those technical assistance efforts. For now, you can email this, this email address on the left of the screen, erf@homebaseCCC.org. And we do have a couple other home-based staff on the line today. I want to invite them to come off mute and just introduce themselves really quick. Maddie, do you want to go first?
Hi, my name is Maddie Nation. I am a senior policy analyst with Homebase. Excited to be launching this next phase of technical assistance. I think Jean is here too. Jean?
Hello, everyone. Jean Field from Homebase. Really excited to begin work with you.
Thanks, guys. You'll meet everyone else soon. So just a couple key takeaways. Here are these two email addresses for you to send messages to if you have any questions. If you have questions for CalICH, things about grant compliance, contracting, reporting, you can email this CalICH email address. If you have any technical assistance needs, any questions that you think you need some TA on, send a message to this erf@homebaseCCC.org email address. Lots of resources available to help you with this project. Just reach out whenever you have any questions or when there's anything you need. So now we're gonna sort of go into this next section, just the sort of key touch points with CalICH related to the grant. There are these three kind of general, these are sort of the three categories of touch points. There's the CalICH biweekly office hours. Many of us might have just come off that call a few minutes ago. We also have quarterly reports. And then there are also these fiscal deadlines. And in the next few slides, we're going to go into detail about each of those touch points. So we'll go through these one by one, and I'm going to pass it off to Crystal to take us through the first one.
Thank you, Garen. As the slide shows, the CalICH office hours and inbox are listed here. So our office hours takes place on the second and fourth Tuesdays of each month, and that's from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. This is a space where CalICH will provide updates, reminders, also answer any questions you have. We do share the office hours calendar invitation and link with all primary contacts from each jurisdiction. The primary contacts are welcome to forward that office hours invitations to additional staff members if you choose. We also have our grants email box, which is calichgrants@bcsh.ca.gov. And all questions can be sent to that inbox at any time. We make sure on our end that all questions are forwarded to the right CalICH group and all answers are answered all questions are answered accordingly. Before I move on, does anyone have any questions about office hours or how to reach any CalICH staff? All right, it looks like there are no questions at this time. So I'll pass it over to Ellen, who's going to explain the elements that are in the quarterly report. Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. So as I mentioned earlier in our presentation, my team oversees the distribution and receipt of the quarterly reports. Quarterly reports are a way that we help or we understand and track your progress towards spending outcomes, as well as the status of the encampment that you were awarded funds for. The quarterly report is a required element of this program and is written into your standard agreement. These are comprehensive documents, meaning each quarterly report is a reflection of from the start of the grant up into a certain point based on what quarter you're reporting on. There are a few elements of the quarterly report, and For those of you who have received previous rounds of ERF funding, you will note that some of these are a little bit different from what the other quarterly reports you've completed look like. We just did a revamp of all of our quarterly reports to make them easier and more streamlined in terms of completion. Some of the elements of the quarterly report are the fiscal element. This is where we will ask you to report your obligated and expended funds as of a certain date. We'll go into what that means in a little bit. These are asked versus your eligible costs. So when you applied for the ERF grant, you were required to submit a budget based on eligible uses and kind of blocking out funds within each of those categories. So we will ask you to report accordingly. Another option within the fiscal component of the quarterly report is if you need to update your budget. So if you notice that something has changed and you need to submit a budget modification, you will be prompted and provided a link to complete that process if needed as well. There will be a few questions about the status of the encampment. Again, these are just questions that we will ask you to complete each quarter. It will have questions about the status of the physical structures of the encampment that you are working with, as well as the individuals who are remaining within the encampment site. We collect these questions. Oh, can we go back? Sorry. To understand the progress you are making and to better provide us with some information on that. There will also be some questions about your HMIS data entry. This allows us to ensure compliance with AB 977. I'm sure you've worked with many different agencies regarding AB 977, and this is the way that Cal ICH kind of tracks that progress. It also helps us to ensure that we can pull person level data from the HMIS data that you are including. And so Eric will speak to that in a bit. The quarterly report will always end with optional project stories. So just to let you all know, we do receive requests from the governor's office, from senators and legislators asking about the status of different encampments. If you have some stellar stories that you would like for us to be able to share with those folks, we always encourage that. It is not required, but you are welcome to include any stories, pictures, video, anything that you would like to convey to us and share with us that we can then share forward and speak of the great work that you all are doing. The last thing I wanted to mention is there will be a project management document that we will ask to be uploaded only in the second quarter. The second quarter is reflective of data through June 30th. And as you can see through statute, a lot of our statutory deadlines fall on June 30th. So because of that, we consider that the end of our fiscal year, we will ask for an update on certain milestones that were included within your application. And we'll speak to that when that report comes out as well. We can move forward to the next slide. These are just some key points about the quarterly report. As I mentioned, it is cumulative data. So while it is requested every quarter, it's reflective of the life of your grant, including fiscal outcomes, project management, all of that. The benefit of that is if there is something that you wanted to update from a previous quarterly report, you don't need to go back to previous quarterly reports. You simply update that in the next one. The first quarterly report for ERF 2R will be released this Friday, September 29th. One thing we want to call out is that this will be for Wave 1 grantees only. So those are grantees who have received funding at this point. We understand, and this is the first time that Cal ICH is working through this process, so we appreciate your flexibility as we do that. But this is the first time we've had different waves of grantees receiving funding at different staggered times. And so we're trying to accommodate that and make sure that we're asking the correct information of the correct people. So as I mentioned, Wave 1 will receive their first quarterly report this Friday. This will cover data through September 30th. So as you're completing the report, we're asking you to report on outcomes through September 30th. The report will be due back October 31st. Moving forward to our calendar. So this is a handout that you will receive following this email. It's a great printout, something you can just stick on your desk, especially for those folks who will be completing reporting for your organization. The quarterly reports are released and due back to Cal ICH on the same day every year. We do this for our HAP reports as well. So the nice part about this is there's a lot of consistency and you can kind of expect what to see. These are the dates that the reports are made available. It also reflects what the data will be through. So what time frame we will be asking for that specific report. And then the big, most important deadline is when those reports are due back to Cal ICH. This will also be included in every email you receive from Cal ICH that releases the report, so includes the link that's embedded. Moving forward. Oh, I jumped ahead. I'm sorry. So I will now pass it over to Eric, who is our research and data specialist. What oh, let me go ahead. What we can actually do too, before I pass it over to Eric, is let's address some of the questions in the chat before we start talking about person served level data. It's a added component of the ERF grants that Eric has worked through to hopefully streamline for all of you. So before we jump into that, let's look to the chat. Sandy asked, we just received funds. When do we have to submit our report? And who is wave one? It looks like, and I apologize if there was confusion for that. So for those of you who attended office hours earlier this morning, Nicole Zaragoza-Smith, who oversees our program implementation team, did a wonderful job of explaining the different rounds of funding. The way the legislature wrote this funding is a little bit unique, and we've been working through that. So essentially, there is an application, but the first portion of kind of different rounds of funding is looking back to previous rounds of applications. That would be the L rounds. And then the R, which is this round, so ERF2R, is taking that new batch of funding and collecting new applications on a rolling basis. So the applications submitted to ERF2R were received and reviewed at different timeframes. And because of that, awards were released at different timeframes as well. While I don't have a specific list in front of me of the ERF2R Wave 1 grantees, it is those grantees that have received funds at this point. The ERF2R Wave 2 and 3, excuse me for stuttering, those grantees were just announced, I want to say within the last month, and apologies again for not having the specific date in front of me, but we can pull that date up. We have the list that will be included for the grantees that will receive funds. So the biggest indicator of whether or not you need to submit a quarterly report would be if you receive an email from us on Friday asking for that report. If you just receive notification within the last month and maybe the contract documents from Cal ICH, that would indicate that you are a later wave. And if you have not received funding, we will not be expecting a quarterly report from you. Amber has also dropped a link in the chat, which is incredibly helpful, that talks that includes all of our notice to award funds and shows the different waves as well. So you'll see there is a notice of intent to award number 1, and that would be indicative of wave 1. And then there is a notice of intent to award number 2, which includes our second and third rounds of fund as well. Again, apologies for all the different acronyms and waves. And we appreciate your flexibility as we're working through this process. I can hold space for another minute or so to see if there's any additional questions. If there are no additional questions, I will pass it over to Eric, who will speak to our person served data. Again, for those of you who have received previous rounds of funding, I encourage you to listen to this portion because this will be a different process than practices we've implemented previously.
Hi again, everybody. Yeah, we got a lot of ground to cover on this slide, so let's get into it. So turning to the person served portion of your reporting requirements, there are some key changes for this portion specifically compared to what was required in previous rounds. So grantees that were highlighted on that intro slide who received money for ERF 1 or 2L, just note that you are now going to have 2 different reporting requirements across the round. So a reporting requirement for ERF 1 and 2L, and then this new system that we're implementing for ERF 2R onwards. But to allay concerns for those grantees, the person served list, which is still required for ERF 1 and 2L, has been significantly whittled down. It's now only 5 fields, and you won't be doing it every quarter. You'll only have to do it a maximum of 3 more times. So this upcoming reporting cycle starting October 1st, that you'll be notified about on Friday, Q2 of 2024, and for ERF 2L folks, that an additional time of Q2 of 2025. But coming back to ERF 2R, we moved away from using that Excel-based person served list. Grantees are now going to be required to set up projects in HMIS that allow Cal ICH to extract that client level data from HDIS in the same way that the person served list previously allowed us to do. So once those projects are set up in HMIS, you'll essentially be done, so to speak, with reporting client level data to us. We'll be able to leverage HDIS to get the information that we need from there onwards. What that means specifically in HMIS, though, is that the HMIS projects need to be a few different things. They need to be exclusive to only ERF 2R clients. So clients served from outside the designated encampments should not be tracked in HMIS using those projects that you have dedicated for ERF 2R. The HMIS projects need to be comprehensive of everyone from the encampment who is served. What I mean by served here means people who are served in a way that necessitates collecting their data and entering it into HMIS. And comprehensive means that across all the dedicated ERF2R projects that you have in HMIS, they cumulatively need to be comprehensive of everyone served. So if you only have one project, for example, then that one project has to be exclusive to ERF2R and comprehensive. But if you have multiple projects set up in HMIS that are all dedicated for ERF2R, then if we aggregate all those clients and find all the unique ones, it has to be collectively comprehensive of everyone from the encampment that got served by ERF2R. And then lastly, that project setup protocol needs to be followed for each discrete encampment site. So if you have one encampment site, you don't have to worry about that. But if you have multiple, then you'll have to make sure that the projects for that site are exclusive and comprehensive. And then separately for a second site, the projects have to be exclusive and comprehensive, and so on and so forth. Technical assistance is going to be available to guide grantees on how to set up those projects in HMIS properly. Our TA provider focusing on AB 977 compliance, that's APT Associates, will be leading on that, not Homebase. So just be aware that while TA from Homebase is ongoing and inclusive of most all topics for ERF, TA from APT is going to be specifically limited in scope to just this topic of HMIS project setup and AB 977 compliance. APT is going to be giving a more thorough walkthrough on setting up projects in HMIS properly the week of October 9th. Date and time is still TBD, but it's going to be forthcoming, so look out for that, and we'll send it as soon as possible. So definitely strong recommendation. Have anyone you think you might need to hear about HMIS reporting there at that walkthrough to be able to ask questions and like get all the info that you need from APT. And Cal ICH in conjunction with APT is subsequently going to be hosting a drop-in session that's going to be on October 25th. 1 to 2 p.m. So if you have remaining questions that you weren't able to resolve in the walkthrough or on your own after like digging into HMIS and like trying to figure it out, then you can bring those questions to us on October 25th. And passing the mic back to you, Ellen.
Thanks, Eric. I think we have some questions, so let's go ahead and take a look at those before we move into our next topic here. I'm going to look at the chat first and then we'll pop over. I see your hand is raised as well. So for Nathaniel's question, how do we report outcomes and services that are provided through leveraged funding? Nathaniel, I think we might need a little bit more information on that question. So feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to explain a little bit more.
Yeah, so we have for our project, we are utilizing a number of leveraged projects that already exist to serve folks from the encampment. But I'm assuming you want to know that they're being served in those, but those are already existing HMIS programs. So trying to figure out how we would report that data, given that it would be separate from the ERF to our project setups that we have.
Yeah, that's a good question, Nathaniel. And I kind of anticipated that would be the case for a lot of grantees. I'm just gonna, okay, perfect. Thanks, Jasmine. So for that one, APT is going to be able to, in that walkthrough session, I would recommend definitely come back to them to be able to get the specifics, and like they'll be able to play out that scenario with you. But what it might mean is that we might ask you to just set up new exclusive projects for ERF2R for each encampment site. And the reason why is because previously when we were using that person served list, it allowed us to be able to tease out the clients that are ERF2R clients from any given project, but it required you all to be able to give us the HMIS personal IDs, which was then like an arduous, like administratively burdensome process. So that's why we've moved to this HDIS related workflow. But definitely I would say, and bring that specific question to the walkthrough, because APT is going to be able to play out that scenario with you and give you like the best advice about how to do it in HMIS moving forward.
Thanks, Eric. Kat, I see your hand is up. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question, you're welcome to.
Yeah, I think maybe I might just wait for the TA session with ABT, because I read through and I heard the description of how the HMIS project should be set up, but I'm still not totally clear, so I can just wait until that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ellen.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that in that session, like they're going to have specific concrete examples. So kind of what Nathaniel was touching on is they'll have examples to like play out the specific scenario. So that sounds like a good idea, Kat, is to just wait for that, and like there possibly your specific example is going to be used.
Fantastic. I guess the second one is how will we find out about that HMIS project setup? Will it be sent out by email?
Yeah, great question. We actually, as this meeting was occurring, just received response from ABT. So we are hopeful to send out the meeting invitation either today or tomorrow. It will go out to this listserv of folks who are attending this meeting. And if you received the request for the ERF2R orientation, you will also receive the meeting request from ABT. We're tentatively looking at the 10th, which is a Tuesday, so hold that on your calendar. And like Eric said, they will be utilizing specific examples. They'll be sharing screens, really going in depth in terms of how to set up these projects. We understand that this is a bigger undertaking up front. Our hope is that although the workload is a little bit more now, that as the life of the grant continues, that workload has decreased. What it does is it prevents you all from having to submit quarterly person served lists. It also increases the data quality because we will all be entering the information in the same way and under the same guidelines. In addition to the walkthrough and the project setup that will take place, what we're looking at is the 10th. We will also have a drop-in session that will be specific to ERF2R grantees in terms of supporting you in completing that first quarterly report. Or if you have any outstanding questions about that HMIS setup as you work through it and within your internal organizations, you're welcome to bring those questions as well to the drop-in session. That will be sent out momentarily, but I can give you the tentative date for that is October 25th at 1 o'clock. And again, we will send this all out in emails, but towards the end of the month, we will have another drop-in session to give you space to ask specific questions. The entire Cal ICH team will be there, as well as the ABT technical assistance providers. So hopefully between all of us, we'll be able to answer the specific scenario questions you have. Chris, I see your question in the chat. Are the HMIS leads for our communities going to be invited to that session, or is there anything we will need to update them on specific to projects set up for ERF? I would encourage you to forward that meeting invite to any relevant staff that you have on your teams, especially the HMIS leads, to attend that meeting. You're welcome to also share the information from them. What we're going to encourage is that there's at least one representative from each grantee pool that attends that meeting and then shares the information accordingly. And the last question I see from Emily, which I'll defer to Garen on, is it possible to receive a copy of this recording?
It sure is. We will send out the slides and the recording after this meeting.
Great. So in respect for time, we'll go ahead and move forward with our next topic here about fiscal deadlines, but we will maintain those questions and circle back to any that are outstanding as well. One thing that we specifically wanted to call attention to is some of these very quickly approaching deadlines that are coming for the ERF 2R grant. The way that statute was written was not the most flexible in terms of when these deadlines hit, but unfortunately we have no flexibility in changing them or pushing them out. So we want to talk about them now and talk about how we hope to support you in meeting these deadlines. As you can see through this chart, and this chart was lifted from one of the tools and handouts that we provide to all of our grantees. You will be receiving that after this meeting. But it is a fiscal deadline kind of cheat sheet for all of the grants included within Cal ICH's portfolio. What we'll call attention to, and Garrett, if you just push forward, I think an animation will pop up, is the ERF 2R grants, which is this group of grants specifically, has two deadlines that will hit on June 30th of next year, 2024. So we're less than a year away from both of these deadlines. The first one is a 100% obligation deadline, which we'll speak to in a bit. And the second is a 50% expenditure deadline. We monitor these deadlines and the status or your progress rather towards those deadlines through quarterly reports. So it's incredibly important that quarterly reports are submitted timely and accurately. But if you could advance one, I just kind of wanted to show the way that statute's written. I'm not going to read this because I know it's incredibly boring, but it kind of talks about what these deadlines mean. Because this funding was on a rolling application basis, the way that it was written and the way that it was allocated is that the deadlines were established 2 years from the appropriation of the legislature. And so that's when the legislature released the funds. It did not coincide with necessarily the application nor your award date. And we know that that can cause a little bit of hardship on our grantees. So we've created some hopeful tools and workarounds to help meet these deadlines. As you can see, there is a 50% expenditure deadline within 2 years, and that is June 30th, 2024. If the 50% deadline is not met, any remaining funds need to be returned to Cal ICH. Our hope is that that does not occur. In our first ERF 1 deadline that had very similar language, none of our grantees were in this situation. I highly attribute that to the supports provided by Home Base, as well as the added support from Cal ICH. There's a lot of kind of people in the wings helping to support and meet these deadlines. A new deadline that was also added to our ERF grants for this round of funding was the 100% obligation deadline, which is also on June 30th, 2024. Obligation is kind of a unique component. We've heard from our grantees that it is not included in many of the other grants that they receive. And so we're going to spend some time speaking to what that means specifically. But 100% of the allocation does need to be obligated, contractually obligated by June 30th, 2024. Should a grantee not meet that deadline, Cal ICH will ask the grantee to submit an alternative disbursement plan, which is simply a document explaining more about how you plan to expend funds, and requires some additional checks from Cal ICH. It would be required to then obligate the remaining funds that were not obligated within 6 months of that June 30th deadline. So by the end of 2024. There is a 100% expenditure deadline the following year. So there are 2 expenditure deadlines written into this grant, but these are the ones we want to focus on now because they are so fast approaching. If you want to move forward to the next slide, Garen. So I wanted to take some time to talk about obligated funds, just because this is a bit of a unique component to Cal ICH funding. This is the way that obligate is defined within your standard agreement. It means that the grantee has placed orders, awarded contract, received services, or entered into similar transactions that require payment using ERF funding. Essentially, you've planned for your funds, and we've put that into some formal documentation. We understand that our grantees utilize ERF funding for a vast variety of costs, including services, physical, goods, capital projects, personnel costs. There's a lot of different things that are included in what you spend your money on. And so how you obligate those costs might look different across the board. What my team has created for our grantees is kind of a handout, a cheat sheet for what would be what some example funds would look like for obligated based on these 4 categories of placed orders, awarded contracts, received services, or entered into similar transactions. We will be providing that handout again in following this presentation. However, I wanted to kind of highlight those really quickly here as well. If you can jump forward to the next slide. So placed orders, here's some of the examples that we have seen in other grants that have been utilized. Again, this does not mean that the cost has actually hit your books, that the funds are expended. These are simply plans or orders that costs that will be incurred in the future, and shows that there is planning associated with the funding. Awarded contracts are the easiest way to track that funds are obligated. If a contract is executed, clearly there's a budget included, and all of those funds would be considered obligated. One really quick signifier that sometimes gets lost in translation is if a dollar has been expended, it is inherently obligated because it has been planned for and spent. And so we had a little bit of confusion about that when we had our first deadline, but just something to clarify for you all as well. Moving forward to the next box. Again, I'm not reading through these just because you will receive this handout following conversation, but just wanted to kind of provide some examples of what it is specifically that we're talking about. These are received services, so services that are received by individuals experiencing homelessness that require future payment. And then this last caveat is kind of how we have worked through a lot of those hard to classify costs. And so we have this kind of clause that there's entered into similar transactions. If you have specific questions about funding or expenditure mechanisms that you're using, and you want to see if that fits within an obligated definition, you are welcome to reach out to us. We are able to provide one-on-one support as needed as well. So we'll continue to work with you all on these things. I think that was all I had about fiscal deadlines. Again, we understand that these deadlines are, again, very fast approaching. Homebase will continue to provide support to you all in terms of the flexibilities allowed with these funds. There are a lot of flexibilities with ERF funding that you may not have in some of your other grant programs that help to ensure that these deadlines are met.
Cool. Thanks, Ellen. Just to reiterate some key takeaways, the quarterly report contains cumulative data. It's requested quarterly. The first quarterly report for wave 1 to our grantees will be October 31st. Will be due October 31st. And then this spending deadline is approaching June 30th, 2024. So I'm going to launch a poll just to sort of check for understanding. And yeah, let's just take a second and fill out this poll. All right. I think most people get it. Both of these statements are true. Yeah, the poll responses are coming in. Yeah, we have like 95%, everybody's got it. Both of these statements are true. Cal ICH uses quarterly reporting to track progress and identify technical assistance needs, and a lot of the numbers in the report are cumulative. Cool. Okay, now we're going to do a quick introduction to technical assistance. Actually, I see, Nathaniel, you have your hand up. Do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Thank you. So given the expenditure deadlines, we didn't, and the fact that we didn't receive our grant agreement until mid-August. Normally, our commission authority would only allow us to contract for expenses incurred after we've received the grant agreement. Does Cal ICH have anything in writing that would allow us to, I mean, the agencies that we're working with began pre-planning in June, certainly have expenses going back to July 1. Is there something that we could have in writing that we could bring to our commission that would allow us to set the contracts prior to the grant agreement with the state that would allow us to bill that far back?
Yeah, great question. And we have received this question from several grantees. It's something that we have been working through. Amber, I'm actually going to ask you if I don't know if you know the status of where the written documentation about that policy is.
Yes,
but
so yeah, that's fine. That's why I came on video, is because if you would like to request that, if you could just email the inbox and make that request in writing, then we will go from there. So anybody that's interested in pre-spending, then please email the inbox and we'll provide parameters at that point.
Thanks, Amber.
Thanks, guys. I see one more question. You can please come off mute and ask your question. Anyone else with a question, we'll have a section at the end for additional questions. But yes, please come off mute.
Hi, hello, my name is Sonflo. I represent a person care clinic, and we do have an agreement. We haven't received funds yet. We still need to do the report for October 31st since we haven't been able to, do anything until we're waiting for the funds to proceed.
Sorry, I think there was a little bit of an echo, so I'm going to repeat your question to make sure that I heard you correctly. But it sounds like you have received funds and you're asking if you do need to complete the report, even if you haven't provided or you haven't incurred any costs, based on some of the things that are happening kind of on your end.
No, it's backwards. We have not received any funds. We do have an agreement. We have a contract. We receive it. It's all signed and done. But we have not received funds yet, so we have to do that.
Great. Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense. Perfect. If you have not received funds, you are welcome to respond to that email that we sent. So if you received the email on Friday, that releases the report and you have not received your funds, so you have not had a physical check sent to you, your funds have not entered into kind of your account, you are welcome to respond to that email indicating that, and we will make record of that on our end. You are not required to submit a report if you have not incurred any costs and have not received funds at this point.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to move us to the next section. Just a quick introduction to technical assistance and different technical assistance opportunities that we have available. I just want to start with a quick introduction to Homebase. So Homebase is a nonprofit organization. We're dedicated to building capacity to prevent homelessness, reduce poverty, foster thriving and inclusive communities. These are kind of some of our areas of expertise on the right side of the screen, or some of the sort of modalities in which we work. Building systems of care, visioning and planning, cross-system collaboration, using data to inform action. And I want to start off just the first step for technical assistance. Crystal mentioned this earlier, is going to be our 2R grantee group assessment. So we're hosting a series of group assessment calls. The goal is to kind of identify each grantee's technical assistance needs. Each call is going to include a handful of staff or a handful of different ERF projects, so 3 to 5 different ERF projects. During the call, program staff are going to share about each project's anticipated technical assistance needs. And you're also going to have a chance to hear directly from other grantees currently working on ERF projects. The calls will last about an hour. You should have received an email from someone on our team, Tanya Morales, last week asking for your community's availability. There are a bunch of different scheduling options. If you haven't received this email or you don't know what we're talking about, just please reach out. Please reach out to us and we'll help schedule your call. So yeah, we'd also ask that you invite all staff that are going to be involved in planning or oversight on your ERF program. So that could be staff from sub-grantees as applicable, or anyone else you think is going to sort of be important to administering your grant. Each grantee community, you can send as many staff as you'd like, but you should all attend the same session. So we ask that, so yeah, you can bring as many staff as you'd like, but just as long as you all attend the same assessment session. So this is after this assessment. These are kind of all the ways that you can participate in technical assistance with us. We're going to go through each of these. I'm going to go through each of these in more detail. But first, I wanted to just sort of make a note about who TA is for. And TA is for lots of different people. It's for you as grantee organizations. Obviously, TA is for you. It's also for sub-grantees, other folks who are kind of administering a part of the grant. It's also for any service providers within encampments who are sort of important to your encampment response, or anyone else that you think is important to your community's encampment response. I think this is one of the kind of exciting things about this grant, is that we have TA available for any of a broad number of stakeholders on your team who are your partners who are working in this encampment through this grant. So when these notices come out with technical assistance that's available, feel free to forward those to any of your partners, anyone who's sort of working specifically in this encampment. So the first way that we do technical assistance is through what we call community learning groups. And we have 2 community learning groups. One is for direct service staff, and another is for what we call system leaders. Direct service staff would be frontline staff and any supervisors for like direct service programs. Some topics that we cover in this community learning group are outreach, interim housing, criminal justice involvement, substance use services. There's the other one, the system leaders community learning group, that the audience there is grant administrators, program directors, any government leaders who are associated with your encampment or interested in your encampment. And some things that we talk about in that community learning group: marketing, grant administration, project management, stuff like that. Those are sort of the topic areas there. And the focus of these really is kind of where I think we like them to be about 50% teaching and about 50% like kind of interaction and conversation between people. The goal of these is for you to be sort of in communication with other folks who are doing similar work in roles similar to yours. So direct service staff or system leaders, that's sort of how we've separated the 2 groups. Those happen once a month and they're about an hour long. We also have one-on-one technical assistance available. And so yeah, each community is kind of assigned to a little team that provides one-on-one technical assistance. These are just some examples of one-on-one of topics that we've kind of tackled one-on-one with communities. We established an onboarding process for new lead staff and kind of helped an assistant city manager to modify the budget to accommodate revised staffing. Maybe also this last one, we facilitated a discussion between a couple communities about best practices and resource coordination. We also we identified, we sort of helped plan this on-site legal clinic for undocumented residents and facilitated peer sharing around that. So these are just, you can see these are a little bit more kind of bespoke based on what is it that is of highest importance to you right now in your encampment that you need technical assistance on. And we also do, kind of separate from our community learning groups, we do these foundational trainings. There are a couple of these that are upcoming. One is on this coming month in October, engaging encampment residents in your encampment response. And then later in the fall, we're going to talk about Medi-Cal and Medicaid enrollment and kind of other healthcare connections. We also have a bunch of recordings available for other foundational trainings that we've done. A lot of these are on kind of evidence-based practices or best practices and sort of direct care for people in your encampment. So that's things like harm reduction, motivational interviewing, trauma-informed care, but then also some training on just sort of like empathy, fatigue, and burnout for frontline staff or folks working in the encampment, and also some more sort of system level things like housing first philosophy, continuum of care eligibility. We have recordings available of all of these, and we can make those recordings available when we follow from this orientation. The last way that we do technical assistance, or the fourth way, I'm sure we'll come up with some more, are these quarterly all grantee convenings. So these, we like for these to be community driven. We focus on kind of sharing emerging best practices, celebrating successes. They often also include some very light pre-work. For this past all grantee convening in September, we asked folks to submit some aggregate data to us. For the previous all grantee convening in June, we asked for some sort of strengths or like TA or opportunities that people see to like learn more. And yeah, so a lot of the content on these all grantee convenings will be facilitated around those submissions that we ask for from you. This is just kind of a summary. A lot of our opportunities coming up for the fall aren't 100% solidified yet, so we don't have registration links for these just yet. But something that we will do is send out a link to kind of join our mailing list. And also you can email us anytime at this address, erf@homebaseCCC.org. That's either to get connected to one-on-one technical assistance, or if you have questions about anything that you see on the screen here. I'm going to launch another poll. This one is less of a quiz. It's more just collecting some information from you all. We want to hear about your experiences with technical assistance. All right. We know some of you all have been attending our technical assistance. We'd love to hear how it's going, whether you've been able to attend so far. All right, I'll give it just another couple seconds. All right, no more responses coming in. Cool. So here's what we have so far. It looks like there are it looks like we've had a handful of folks who have attended. a large number of folks who haven't. And it looks like we have some folks who are finding it helpful, some folks who kind of aren't sure yet, and some others who haven't participated yet. So yeah, we're excited for everybody to participate. Yeah, and reach out to us if you have any technical assistance needs. So just another couple of takeaways. And like I said, we will send out these slides, so you can actually click this link to join our mailing list to stay up to date just on our group technical assistance offerings. You can email this address anytime to get connected with one-on-one TA. Any other questions about TA opportunities? Okay, so I wanted to leave a moment for additional questions. So what questions have come up either from the past section or lingering questions from sort of grant administration? Feel free to come off mute, raise your hand, put questions in the chat box. I see one person with their hand up. So yeah, go ahead, please come off mute. I guess they put their hand down. Okay. All right. So, like I said, this is not the final opportunity to ask questions.
Sorry.
Oh, please go ahead.
The chat. So the chat question is, can Cal ICH please clarify what is meant by pre-spending as something that may be considered?
Yes, let me be a little more clear and transparent here. So what we've realized is that you all have very tight deadlines to work within, and we really want to help you in meeting those expenditure deadlines. So we realize that can be difficult at your local levels, and we are working on an internal policy right now that would allow you to claim not reimbursement, but claim funding, the use of funding prior to you receiving the actual check. Now, we have not finalized the policy. That's why I'm saying if you have a request to utilize the reporting of funding prior to receiving the funding in your hand and in your bank account, I would like you to email the Cal ICH grants inbox. What we will do from there is, look at the request and talk with our leadership about that, and then see if that is something that can be approved on your request, or if we can work with you within some certain context. So I apologize that I don't have direct information on that, but we are working on an internal policy on that. That would be a policy for all ERF grantees.
Thanks, Amber. I see one more question from Sasha, if you want to come off mute.
Yeah, so it sounds like when you're talking about pre-spending, you're talking about maybe more like retroactive spending. And I had a question about prepaying contracts and if there's been parameters set up for that yet.
Would you like me to? Oh, I see she went. Yeah, great question, Sasha. We've worked through this quite a bit with our ERF 1 grantees. So there is flexibility within the ERF grant to prepay costs. So to provide payment to either subcontractors. We have a lot of grantees in ERF 1 who utilize this for hotel motel vouchers or any type of subsidy, where they would offer the prepayment prior to the deadline. That would count as expended from your perspective, although that cost may not have actually been incurred at a service level. And so it would be kind of up to local procedures and local process to ensure that those funds do actually be spent in a timely way prior to the end of the grant. But it is a strategy that you are welcome to use with these funds as well.
And there isn't specific parameters, just whatever's within our local sort of parameters around that?
Yeah, we definitely rely heavily on local procedures and local parameters as well. So if it is allowable within your jurisdiction, you are welcome to use that for these funds as well.
Thank you.
I saw one more question in the chat. If the city has executed contracts for services to be rendered over the next 12 months, these funds are obligated, therefore, these funds are obligated, therefore can be considered expended.
Great question, and I'm glad we're clarifying this. So if the contract has been completed and the services are taking place over the next 12 months, those funds would be considered obligated. They are planned for and they are contractually set aside. They would not be considered expended until the cost is actually incurred. So if you are utilizing a invoice process for these contracts, the expended requirement would hit when those costs have left your books. It's the other way around where they're not mutually exclusive. So if a dollar has been expended, if you have spent a dollar, it is inherently obligated. And we like to clarify that because there is the 100% obligation requirement that falls on June 30th, 2024. And so sometimes that can get confusing. If you've spent 20% of your funds, then some folks have reported only 80% obligation. That's not the case. I probably over-explained that, so apologies. But yes, so in your example specifically, those funds would be considered obligated. They would not be considered expended until they have actually been spent.
There's one more question in the chat here about are ERF funds applicable to federal regulations such as NEPA, Davis-Bacon, Section 3, etc.
Yeah, go ahead, Amber. I see you coming off video as well. I'll start just by saying these are state dollars, and so they are not held to the same standards as federal dollars. However, Amber, if there's anything you wanted to add.
No, you just answered the question. I don't need to be on here.
Yeah, there is, requirements that come with state funding. However, as we all know, they tend to be a little bit less stringent than our friends at the federal level. I see this question. Sorry, Karen. I'll just say.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
From Chris, if the funds are going to be spent by the city on staff, motel vouchers, administration, and are not contracted out, what do we need to do to consider them obligated? Great question, Chris. We got this question a lot. With our first obligation deadline, we know that this is a unique circumstance. It's something that's completely available to you. What we've accepted previously are things such as internal budgets that have been signed off by an executive or a leadership level position. There are different kind of MOUs that can be created. There are different voucher documentation that can be used. I think it depends a lot on what is available to you with your city's capability. And what we can do to work with you to make sure that those costs have been documented as obligated. So what I would encourage you to do is to send your question to the Cal ICH Grants inbox. We can then review it. We sometimes will pull in our legal counsel as well to provide any type of insight he might have, and then we'll be able to provide you with a more comprehensive answer.
I'm going to wait. I'm going to give it like maybe 30 more seconds to see if anything comes in the chat. And if anybody wants to raise their hand and ask a question, and then we'll move on. Okay. I don't know if that was actually 30 seconds, but it felt like 30 seconds. So we're going to move on. Thanks so much, everyone. And so just a final poll. This is more just to tell us how it went and how we can do better in the future. I'll leave this up for maybe another minute and then we'll move on. Thanks so much, everybody. Excited to read your feedback. All right, I think the responses are starting to, actually, as soon as I said that, another couple trickled in. But yeah, I'll end the poll in just a couple of seconds. Thanks so much, everybody, for participating. All right. So just a couple of action items coming up. For the first quarterly report for the Wave 1 grantees will be due October 31st. You can sign up for any technical assistance opportunities. I should note we have one coming up right after this call. For those who are interested, we have one of our community learning groups happening in just 15 minutes. We'd also love for you to share any news of any accomplishments with us at any time. We'd love to hear how things are going. So with that, thank you so much. Just sharing these two email addresses once again to reach out to Cal ICH or to Homebase with any questions. Thanks so much, everyone. Looking forward to working with you all.
Thank you.